I've always been told that when you come up with a brand and a logo and kind of an overall existence of your company, a visual representation, it should be so simple, like a caveman can figure it out, right? It's the old billboard adage. So simple, you get it, looking at it for 3 seconds or less, driving 80 miles an hour down the road, right? When you see the Cracker Barrel billboards when you're driving on vacation somewhere down the interstate, and you see, it's a plate of food with a little barrel and the Cracker Barrel logo, and it's, plate of food, hot food now, exit next, and it's so simple, it's so easy that you can just glance up at it and get it. And I think a lot of people miss that. So I'm interested. Let's talk about your company, Wayne Media, and Speakeasy Podcast Network. Let's talk about Wayne Media. You got an interesting logo there. How in the heck, what's your story? How did you end up with was it a fox or a dog or some kind of a four-legged animal and all that? Whoops. Tell us the story about that. How did you land on that and get to where you are today?
Yeah, so initially when I started the brand, we were Wayne Consulting Group. And in my mind, I wanted something to be so minimalist that literally the typeface stood out above everything else. So, we went and there was this font called Voga, which I couldn't really find anybody using. And it was a very, very clean, crisp, almost like what you would see on a law firm. And I was like, I really liked the W. The W looked really cool. So it was almost like a checkerboard type of crossing on the W. It looked really cool. And so that's what we rolled with. But then as things evolved and we moved into Wayne Media because we were doing more media work than consulting, we went with this font called Senzel and just made it a little bit thicker and cleaner, still keeping that same legal aesthetic. Because for us, the cleanliness of the font, the spacing, all of that to me leads to credibility. It's clean, it's not messy, it's crisp. And then the fox came in because, as I was thinking about animals that I quite like and like to learn about, and also animals that are very much kind of in the same pathway as our business. Foxes resonated with me because foxes very much are outside the box thinkers. They're very cunning and sly and quick and really the kind of the leader of the pack in their domain. And that was what I wanted, was kind of a representation of us being always a step ahead of what's coming next in terms of our competition. And while I don't want sly and cunning to come across as, deceptive, because that's certainly not what we're aiming for, I do want it to come across as we are going to do everything we can to stay ahead of trends and be on top of things before anybody else gets there.
That's really cool. There's a lot of depth to that, a lot of thought through that, and I could see that. I've gotten to know you, and I can kind of see that. What I thought you were going to say?
Yeah.
Sometimes when you ask them their story, they'll tell you a simple kind of thing, and you're like, "What? Are you serious? That's where it came from?" Here's what I thought you were going to say. Like, hey,
back of a napkin.
I took my kids to Great Wolf Lodge. I like the wolf. I decided to use a wolf or something, right? Sometimes you'll hear that from people, and it's like, okay, I guess that works. But I like the thought in it. It has meaning. It connects. And now that I understand that, and I bet your listeners and your clients and prospects out there understand that, that makes a lot of sense in your line of work. And to me, it does give you that credibility. It sure does.
Yeah. And and there's so much more to the story, but for me, I just needed something that could differentiate us. And for me, I grew up in northern Michigan where there is no branding. Everything is just kind of done by one sign company, and there's not really a lot of thought put into the background of a business. And so I grew up seeing the worst logos and, the worst kind of execution of, a business plan, and just in the neighborhoods and communities that I was in, And a big part of that whole thing was like, well, I want something that is going to be clean and
Yeah.
crisp and kind of represent the fact that we do try and run as a minimalist company. And I want people to understand that kind of from just the
Yeah.
logo. And I think we've gone a long way to achieve that.
No, I'd say you have. It's very distinguishable, etc. I want to follow up on something. You said something, a particular word, many times on today's episode already. I want to make sure the audience is clear on what that is. Minimalist. You've used that many, many times. What is that? Help us understand that from your perspective.
Yeah, so minimalism really is, it's really just, I think of it as kind of an accounting tactic. Most people think of minimalism and they think of, you need to have the least amount of possessions possible. And that's really not it. Minimalism on the personal spectrum is, does everything that you own bring you value? So as I started to learn more about this philosophy and started adapting more to it, I started taking an inventory of the things that I have and own, and realized a lot of the things that I have don't really bring me a lot of value. So a lot of them I got rid of. And as I was building the business, I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we kind of ran our company the same way as well? Because there's so much, fat and inflation and bloat in companies, if we really were thoughtful about the things that we owned and the subscriptions that we had, and we had that mindset from day one, that would give us a really good advantage as well. So I've always ran on this principle of, does this item or does this subscription bring us value? And if it doesn't, then we probably don't need it.
Well, today on this episode of Soar Higher, we're going to talk about one of the biggest challenges that I certainly see in business. I think you see it quite often in your marketing business as well. We've talked about this a little bit before, just in some casual conversation. But the 5 reasons that businesses, why they go out of business. Statistically speaking, Rob, I know you know this, but for the audience's purposes, about 70% of all businesses that start will eventually fail between years 3 and 5. Only 30% of businesses started will ever make it to year 10, and about 10% of the businesses ever make it to year 15 or beyond. So this is a really big challenge, especially right now with the Great Resignation and all the things going on in our world that we live in from a business and career standpoint. A lot of people have decided not to go back to work and create their own businesses, be a freelancer. A lot of people doing this. So I think, and I hope, that what we talk about today will be very, very beneficial and maybe help people in guiding them and making really good decisions, so they're not the 70% statistic of people that go out of business. And so you're probably wondering, okay, great. What are these 5 main things, reasons why people go out of business? Well, the first one is they expect people to care as much about their business or product or service as much as they do. A lot of times they don't. The second reason is they overestimate their cash flow, how much money they're going to make, and really underestimate the expenses that come along with running a business. They always underestimate that. Number 3, they underestimate their expenses. I said that twice. Very important reason why. They underestimate their expenses. They really don't understand what it takes to drive a business in an efficient manner. And I know you've got a term for that. We'll get into that here in a minute, I'm sure. Number 4, they devalue networking, meaning they don't invest in relationships. They don't invest in connecting with people in the right ways to drive the attention they need to their business so that it can move forward. And number 5, they don't take the time in the interview process, and they don't take it seriously when trying to bring the right people into the firm. And so really powerful things, Rob. These are trending right now. They're the top, headaches that business owners are having. Talk to us about what you're seeing out there. You're in marketing. You deal with a lot of different companies in a lot of different stages. How does this resonate with you? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of it. Like, I'm very much in the small business sector. So my office is in a downtown district, right on literally Main Street, and in a Grand River is our intersection. So we're right on everything. And what I see a lot is small businesses, really missing the mark on a handful or all 5 of those things. We'll get into them more, detailed here in a minute, but largely all of those just kind of summarize just a true lack of diligence, a true lack of oversight in the actual, they are very much in the operator role, not in the owner role. And when you're an owner-operator, when you're in the field and you're quarterbacking the back end of the business, you can't ignore one role. You can't just say, oh, I'm just an owner, I'm not going to operate. You can't say, I'm just an operator, I'm not going to own. And that's something that I think a lot of small businesses struggle with early on, because it's hard to set up those distinctions, because in the beginning you have to wear all the hats.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I see a lot of business owners struggle in keeping up with everything. They underestimate it. They normally don't have somebody like me in their corner, a coach. They got this great idea. Hey, I want to sell widgets. I want to make quilts, or I don't know, whatever that is they want to do, that they like to do. It's a hobby, and all of a sudden few people buy it, and all of a sudden it turns into a business. I met a guy recently that I think is going to become a client. We were still talking through some things and figuring that out. But he comes to me and he's like, hey, very entrepreneurial guy. I mean, he just sees opportunity. He's just an entrepreneur at heart. You can see it a mile away. He comes in and says, hey, I was doing window cleaning, and I was doing window cleaning for a pizza company, and they had a breakdown of their oven. They needed their ovens cleaned. And he overheard the conversation. He's like, well, I know how to clean ovens. I can probably do that for you. Well, that turned into an opportunity with a franchise that turned into 10 stores, turned into him talking to his other franchise buddies, and that turned into 20 stores. And now this thing has just boomed. It's taken off. He can't keep up with it all, and he's into QuickBooks one minute, he doesn't know his cash flows. He doesn't know when money's coming in, what money's going out, and he is stretched in 100 different directions at the same time, and drowning in it. Very successful, but he's hinging on a danger zone there. So, do you have clients like that, Rob? Or do you have similar things? What do you do when you see people like that?
Yeah, so largely what we do is, especially on the marketing side, because we don't, we're not your typical marketing agency where we're just going to come in and do socials and then, shut the door and go home. I want to see the whole business holistically. And as much as a business owner is willing to share with me, I want to hear about it, because all of those details, even if they don't seem like they have much to do with the actual campaigns we run or the marketing or branding that we do or the creative that we make, that actually does. Because that helps inform us on customer demographics, or your target client, or just where the business can double down, where the business is at for bandwidth. So if you have 3 verticals and all of them are at 100%, why are we out there going to get you more business? Why aren't we trying to find out ways to open up that bandwidth so you can actually accept more business and serve them well? Yeah. So all of those things are really important. But for our clients, we've been super fortunate in that usually when clients kind of get to the stage where they're ready to invest in marketing, they have a lot of those things figured out. And for the ones that don't, very much like you've done, we've gone in and done some organizational development and tried to help them restructure so they can get into a position of actually taking on new business. Because like I tell everyone, I can make your phones ring all day long, but if you don't have someone at that front desk to answer the phone who someone can hear smiling through the phone, it's not going to mean anything. President
Lincoln under his principle of people, was also an alliance builder. He knew he couldn't be successful. He couldn't lead the country and accomplish the massive amount of things that need to be accomplished in the middle of a civil war to move the country together, to unite the country, to drive new purpose and meaning for the country going forward, where we all people could enjoy those freedoms without building alliances, building changing hearts and minds, not only of the people in his own staff, but the people in general, the citizens, the people that were facing the atrocities of war, people that were volunteering to fight in the war and support the war in all the ways possible. One of the things that I think is very, very powerful is he's known to be a persuader. His choice in influencing people was to persuade people, not coerce people, not to force people. Wasn't his way or the highway, or my way is the best. It wasn't putting fear into people, leading by fear. He led by persuading them, getting them to understand his perspective as the president of the United States. He's in charge of the whole country, and a lot of people don't understand the broader dynamics there. They only see things through the lens for which they can see things, and he was an expert. He was one of the best at persuading people and getting them to understand his perspective and getting them on board. He was also really great at understanding their perspective. And understanding that perspective meant it changed his views, for which there was alignment between people that may have not have been in sync at the beginning of the conversation, where they leave the conversation, where they can find a place where they both can come to terms, and the president can make really good decisions, and people would be excited about supporting him. One really powerful lesson there is he is a person of the people. Leadership is about people. Managing is about equipment, resources, tools, and things like that. Leadership is about people. If you can't connect with people, if you can't get people on board and motivate them and excite them and get them to see something bigger than what they are able to see and understand things on a different level so they can contribute to things that are bigger than themselves, it's hard to lead because people aren't motivated to move. President Lincoln was great at that. Number two, President Lincoln's second strategy for in his book, based off of Lincoln on leadership, was character. Number two is character. A person has to have character to be a leader. You can't not have values and principles and be of good character and not lead. There's a quote of President Lincoln where he talks about, and I quote, "If you want to understand the character of a man, put him in a position of power." My goodness, man, if we look around in our politics today, we see many, many examples of where people are in a position of power, and sometimes they abuse that. They aren't looking out for the best interest of the people that support them. They're making bad decisions. They're making ill-informed decisions, doing things that are unethical, illegal. Unfortunately, there are people in our world that just aren't of good character. Therefore, they're unable and unqualified to lead. Even though they may be in a leadership position, it's temporarily. It's a matter of time before they fall out of that position of leadership. We see examples of this all the time in the news. So be a person of character. Honesty. Well, there's a reason Abraham Lincoln is one of the most liked and popular presidents of our time. One of the reasons is because of his nickname, Honest Abe. He was very honest, very down to earth, very genuine and sincere, and he led with the utmost integrity. That was critical, especially during a time of turmoil and war. Another principle that President Lincoln was focused on was never lead and act out of vengeance. Always give yourself time to process information, even if it's bad information, even if people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're defiant, or things aren't going according to plan. Never, never lead and act and make decisions based on vengeance. Allow that to process. Allow yourself to get better information. Allow yourself to calm down, look at the facts, look at the data and what the data is telling you, and allow those things and the people around you that are experts to help guide those decisions, not with a bad attitude, not in anger, not with vengeance. The third component of character is to be courageous to take on criticism, especially in this modern day world. President Lincoln certainly had a lot of critics and people judging you when you're the leader of the free world, when you're a leader, period. It doesn't matter if you're the president of the United States, if you are a leader of a small company, a big company, a nonprofit, or anything else out there. If you're in a position of leadership, you are going to be criticized often. Doesn't mean you're bad, doesn't mean you're doing the wrong things. Sometimes people just are in a place in life where that's just where they're at. They're critical, they're judgmental, and you can't change that. Sometimes people just don't understand what's going on. They don't understand enough, and they only have a certain amount of information. And so based off of the lens for which they're seeing things, they start criticizing because they don't understand the big picture. When that happens, that's when, as a leader, you need to have the courage to lean into the criticism. A lot of people are defensive about criticism and they don't like criticism. They'll get in front of you and they'll say, okay, yeah, give me some feedback. How are things going? And that's great. But if you give them criticism, like, I don't think that was a good decision. This doesn't seem to be working. People aren't excited to follow you down this path. Something's not right here. And you start getting criticism. That's, as a leader, should be, tipping you off. Your red flag should be just beeping and alarming in your mind that something is not right. Something's disconnected. Doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that the people you're leading are not connected with you in the way you need them to be. That's where you need to pause, understand the criticism, embrace it, have courage to be in it. And sometimes, you just have to agree to disagree with certain people, but welcome the criticism, get in the mud and roll around, with people in the mud, soaking up the criticism, because the criticism can give you really important information. So be courageous with taking on the criticism. All right, so we've covered number 1, which is people, covered number 2, which is character. We're going to get into number 3, which is the endeavor part, acting, taking action, right? Being decisive. President Lincoln was very, very good in his decision making. He wasn't perfect, of course. He's a human. Nobody's perfect. But generally speaking, he made really good decisions because he did his absolute best to get the best information from the source, the source and the experts of the information from their perspective, from their office, from their battlefield headquarters, from whatever perspective they may be in at the time. He prided himself in going to the source and getting as best information as possible to make those decisions. And when he felt he had the right decision, he was decisive. He would execute. He would not hesitate. He would not overthink. He would not overanalyze. He would execute and move forward. Second part of endeavor, I think is really, really cool, is leading by being led. Well, what does that mean? That means you let your subordinate leaders lead you, meaning they're the experts. They're, in this case, the generals that were leading the military activities, in the Confederate War. They were on the ground. They were seeing things unfold as things were happening. They had the best information. And so when President Lincoln would engage them and ask them how it's going and what do you need? How can we support you? Have we made the advancements we need to make? Have we conquered the battles we need to conquer? And he got information from them. He would also say, well, what do we need to do next? What do you recommend we do? And he let the generals and his cabinet members that he put in leadership positions lead him. Most of the time, he would agree with them and move forward. There were occasions where he didn't think things were going right, or they were missing a component of whatever was going on that he needed to inject and make sure those things happened when they needed to happen, how they needed to happen. And he was very decisive in doing that at certain times with certain people. He would remove people from positions that weren't able to advance the cause, and he put more people in those positions that were able to overcome obstacles and do those things. The third thing is having goals. Be decisive. Let your subordinate leaders lead you, and then having goals. The most successful people in life have goals. If you don't have goals, then you can't get everybody on the same page because everybody's doing their own thing if there's no goals that align everybody together. You have to have goals. You have to talk about the goals, put the goals into place, be very clear about the goals, and follow up until the goals are completed. Number 4, be results oriented. Life rewards action and results, period. President Lincoln was excellent at ensuring you can get the results that need to happen. You have to win the battle here before you can win the war down the road. Little small battles and victories over a period of time from region to region allow you to win the war. That was why the Union was so successful. Ultimately, is they managed the battles and got the victories. They got the results, which led to ultimately winning the war. The war ended. Slavery was over. The country came together, and the rest is history. There's another interesting aspect called keep searching for the right grant. As I mentioned earlier, President Lincoln, when it came to generals leading the war effort, went through 9 different leaders before he met Ulysses S. Grant, who was able to actually do the things he needed to fully do throughout the course of this endeavor. Went through 9 different generals. So what's the lesson there for you leaders listening right now is always keep moving forward. Always keep challenging your people. And if you don't feel things are right, don't hesitate in finding the next leader. A lot of folks today, with the great resignation and post-pandemic stuff going on and the economy the way it is, people are scared to let go of people. They're scared to make moves because they don't know if they're going to find somebody or if it's going to cause a major disruption in the business. And I was talking to a leader in a company the other day that hired me to work in his company, and he's got no leadership in his company. He is the CEO. He is the only leader. Out of 100 employees, he is the only true leader. He's got some supervisors, got a couple of mid-level managers, but they're still junior and inexperienced himself, and he's working himself to death trying to lead and train and do all this stuff and run the company, and the company's struggling, is in really bad shape, unfortunately. Hopefully we can turn that around here real soon, but he needs to find the right grant, just like Lincoln did, to help him move, win the battles, and ultimately win the war. This particular gentleman that I talked to needs the right grant. He needs a few more leaders on the team that can move the ball and take all the pressure off himself, because he's certainly not able to do everything for everybody.